SABC management has advised all staff who work at the Radio Park building here in Auckland Park not to report for duty today as cleanup operations are still underway. And this follows yesterday's diesel spillage in the building. Now, the public broadcaster's internal systems had switched from city power to its backup generator during a power outage yesterday. The SABC says that aging equipment failed and that led to the diesel tank overflowing and spilling, and staff were immediately evacuated. Several SABC radio stations had to enforce contingency plans for their broadcasts. So for more on the diesel spillage here at the SABC, we're joined now by Dr. Craig van Rooyen, SABC Acting Chief Operations Officer. Good morning. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, Akina.
So, of course, quite a bit of talk and consternation amongst SABC staff. Not sure how much of this the public knows about, but if you could just give us a brief sense of how exactly the spillage happened.
Yes. Sakina, just before I start with that, I think the staff is our main concern at the SABC, hence the mitigating factors we've put in place in terms of requesting staff to only report for work on Monday morning. Not all of the SAB staff, we're referring to those who work in the Auckland Park building.
At Radio Park.
At Radio Park. This started yesterday when one of our diesel tanks started leaking, and we suspected it was a valve, which then cascaded down the whole building from the 17th floor, which became a huge health and safety risk. The challenge with that is that you don't know when diesel can spark, and we also had 3 employees who were submitted to hospital. One of them is still in a critical condition in the intensive unit, and we wish that employee well and a speedy recovery. And for that reason, we place our staff first, and we look after the operational issues secondly when it comes to these types of issues.
So, Mr. van Rooyen, why were the 3 staff members admitted to hospital? What sort of injury did they suffer?
The reports that had come back to us is that they suffered from inhalation from the diesel fumes, and 2 were released, I think, within 2 hours of being submitted. And we are most concerned about the 3rd person who's still in hospital.
Which obviously then informs the decision that the SABC has taken. But I guess also of concern then is, of course, the state of the diesel tanks that obviously the spill came from. And can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yes.
How many of those do we have on the SABC premises around Auckland Park, and what sort of state are they in?
Okay. I think most of the reticulation within the SABC is in an extremely poor state, and that's as a result of a lack of maintenance over the last 10 to maybe 20 years. Most of the maintenance required for these aging equipment really needed to be maintained within the last 5 years. And as a result, we can expect that we would have many of these types of issues incurring going into the future. I must add also that based on the incident that happened yesterday, we're not exactly sure whether it was a valve, because we are still waiting for people to go into the building to do an evaluation and give us a report as to exactly what had happened there. The concern as well is that, within the SABC, most of the available funds are used to pay salaries. So there's been a gap over the years in terms of using money for proper maintenance. And if you look at this building, or at least the Auckland Park building, Radio Park, it still had a standby generator located on the 16th floor, which caused the diesel to, of course, cascade down the floors. The newer type of operations in buildings are not to have a generator on the 16th floor. That's a very old way of working. And because there's been no funds to do those replacements, we suffer these types of relapses within the SABC.
So from what you're saying, it's safe to assume that you may have similar sort of situations in some of the other buildings, like here at TV Park. We have other buildings that also belong to the SABC in this precinct. Would it be safe to make that assumption then?
I would say so. The similarity is very close to having a motor vehicle. If you're not maintaining it, you can expect things to go wrong. And I think that would probably go for all the buildings around the SABC.
So you said there's no money.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen now? Has an assessment been done with regard to the extent of the problem? What's it going to cost us if that has been done, in fact, and where's the money going to come from?
Yes, the teams are currently looking at that to make an assessment. And part of the assessment will also be the requirements for cost for repair. The other thing I want to touch on as well is we don't have money, but there's a lot of work that's been done by the ministry as well as the Department of Treasury to work towards getting a guarantee. There's been a large commitment from the Department of Treasury, but of course giving a guarantee does not necessarily mean that the banks give you the money. And the stage that we find ourselves in at the moment is that the banks are going through their evaluations based on the securities that had been given to them by Treasury, and I think we're waiting on the banks to come back to us. We'll be very cautious in terms of how we proceed with people in mind, and again we have to go through a situation where probably we're going to have to take from other areas of the business to patch up these maintenance areas of maintenance and putting our safety of our people first within the SABC.
Dr. Craig van Rooyen, thanks so much for coming through to give us an update on this situation. And of course, SABC Radio Park employees, people who work from that particular building, are being urged not to come to work until Monday because that situation is still being assessed. And of course, we will have a mop-up operation at that building before people can return. All right, wait, just before I did Dr. van Rooyen go, I just remembered something. I'm sorry, Director Lucia there, but some of the radio stations that operate from Radio Park, yeah, like Metro FM, like 5FM and 2000 Y in the foyer there, what's happening to them?
Yes. So the operations for those 4 radio stations that you mentioned, it's still going on. Because it's operating out of the ground floor, plans have been made for immediate evacuation. And we also have teams available from the OHASA teams within the SABC on standby around those operations. So I can say that those are fairly safe. Any movement around that first floor will, of course, be escorted by someone, but those operations are running. The other radio stations, of course, SAFM and RS here have been moved to the other buildings. And, of course, we have the same concerns for all of the other regional offices going forward.
Just wanted clarity on that. Thanks so much, Dr. Craig van Rooyen, the Acting Chief Operations Officer here at the SABC. So if you're an SABC employee and you work at Radio Park, the message going out to you is that you should only report for duty on Monday. Right, with that, let's take a break.
Thanks.